Hello everyone. Today you're going to be listening to a text that I'm going to read to you about the Navajo code talkers. During World War II, there was a small group of Navajo patriots that used their native language as code to communicate secret messages to the Allied troops. This caused many lives to be saved during that war. So you're going to be listening to an informational text. You're going to be hearing facts and information about a particular topic that has to do with communication. These events happened in the 1940s when our country was involved in World War II. So while you're listening, your job is to think about 3 things that you learned. What you need to do right now is make sure that you've got your paper and your writing tool so that you can take notes as you listen to this text. Once you've finished listening to the text as many times as you need, be ready to send me a message including the 3 things that you learned. Remember, you're going to title the subject of your message, Navajo Code Talkers. Before we get into the text, there are a few vocabulary words that will show up that I want you to know about before we get into the text. The first vocabulary word is Marines. A Marine is a soldier that's trained on land and at sea, so they have the ability to fight and protect a place on the water and also on land. The next vocabulary word that you'll need to know is eavesdrop. So when you eavesdrop on someone, you're secretly listening in on a conversation that they're having. The next vocabulary word is cumbersome. When something is cumbersome, it's large, heavy, and very difficult to carry. The next word is allies. Those are groups of people who are on the same team. They support one another. The final vocabulary word is pitch. The pitch of something is how high or low of a sound it makes. So those are the vocabulary words. Get ready to take notes and listen to the unbroken code of the Navajo Code Talkers. This text is by Catherine Ripley, and here's the introduction. World War II began in September 1939 when Germany, under the control of Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland. The United States entered the war on December 7, 1941, when Japan bombed the U.S. Navy in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. At this point, Japan had formed an alliance with Germany. Here's the initial start of the text. It's August 7th, 1942, in the middle of World War II, and a huge battle is unfolding on Guadalcanal Island in the Pacific Ocean. Hidden in the steamy jungle, 2 Japanese soldiers watch American Marines roll out wire from one battle patrol to the next. In the distance, gunfire rattles and bombs blast. When the Americans are gone, the soldiers creep out to tap into the newly laid communication line. Both understand English well and hope to eavesdrop on what the Americans are planning. The first Japanese soldier listens, and a look of surprise crosses his face. He hears a sing-song mumbling and some throaty gurgles and clicks. The second soldier also listens and recognizes that it isn't English. It's like nothing they've ever heard before. What do they hear? 2 Navajo code talkers on their field telephones. The code talkers enabled Americans to communicate secretly and speedily in the heat of battle and were critical to winning the war in the Pacific. Their code was never broken by the Japanese. So the strange thing about the message that the Japanese soldiers heard over their communication line was that the language wasn't like anything they'd ever heard before. Let's keep going with the story. The first heading says, "Why Navajo?" The idea for using Navajo code talkers was suggested by the son of a missionary, Philip Johnston, who had grown up on the Navajo reservation. Johnston knew that Navajo was an unusual language that few people outside the tribe could understand, and he also knew how important it was for the Marines to be able to communicate quickly without using cumbersome decoding machines or code books that could fall into enemy hands. During World War I, Choctaw Indians had sent messages for the U.S. Army, but Johnston knew that German students had studied and learned many Indian languages since then, including Choctaw. The Germans, now allies with Japan, had not studied Navajo. Navajo is very different from English and very difficult to learn. For example, there are 37 different ways to pronounce the word for wind in Navajo. Just by using this one word and pitching your voice in slightly different ways, you can say that the wind is making you cold or warming you or blowing away from you. But the difficulty of understanding Navajo made it perfect for keeping messages secret during war. And when Johnston took his idea to the Marines, they thought, yes, this could work. So initially, the Choctaw language had been used as a code in World War I, but German soldiers had studied that language and some others since, so they came to understand the Choctaw language. What makes the Navajo language particularly difficult to understand, though, is the pitch of the speaker's voice. That can change the meaning of words. So here's the next heading, and it's called the code. The plan succeeded not only because no Japanese understood Navajo, but also because the Navajo talked in a special code. In Navajo, there is no word for dive bomber or for other military terms. So the code talkers gave bird names to airplanes and fish names to ships. For example, dive bombers became chicken gawks or guinea. Fighter planes were hummingbirds or dahi-tihi, and the battleship was a whale or lotso. The code talkers called hand grenades potatoes or nimasi, and bombs were eggs or aishi. This code was so secret and safe that other Navajo couldn't understand it unless they were specially trained. Once the Japanese hoped to crack the code by capturing a Navajo soldier, but because he was not a code talker, he could not translate messages for them. Here's the final heading. It's called a secret service. After the war, the work of the Navajo code talkers was kept secret in case the U.S. needed to call on them and their unbroken code again. Today, the bravery of the code talkers is well known, but the Navajo culture does not glorify war. When Navajo code talkers returned home from war and were asked what they had done, many simply said, "I was a radio man." So that's the end of the text. Now you're ready to send a message to me with the subject line titled Navajo Code Talkers. Make sure that you're telling me 3 things that you learned from listening to this text. I'm looking forward to receiving your messages, and I will reply once I get them. Thank you in advance, and I'll talk to you later.